Hey everyone, it's Leah. This is a really exciting time for me and the Everyday Better team. If you are a regular listener, you know that I'm currently pregnant and I'm actually in my third trimester. The past few months have been a bit of a whirlwind, to put it lightly, both personally and professionally. On top of the multitude of emotions I've experienced in these past 8 months and all the work my husband and I have been doing to prepare for our first baby, I've also been dealing with some big questions that I think any prospective working mom faces. What does all of this mean for my work? In typical fashion, for me, I go into the all or nothing thinking and catastrophizing. I worried about if this would be the end of my career. I worried I might never want to go back to work and wondered what that might mean. Would I ever get promoted again? Would some of my long-term dreams of being more entrepreneurial, writing books, and doing more global travel be thwarted? Between work, marriage, friends, and family. I couldn't understand how women balanced it all. I wondered if they really even did. So for today's show, I've gathered together 3 of my LinkedIn colleagues and friends who are also moms to ask them my most pressing questions about their parenting journeys and what happens to your career after having kids. Make sure you stay tuned till the end of this episode for a very special announcement about what's coming up for Everyday Better these next few months. Hey everyone, from LinkedIn News, I'm Leah Smart, and this is Everyday Better, a personal development podcast where every week I sit down with some of the world's brightest minds and bravest hearts who use science and story to share strategies for how we can flourish individually, in relationship to others, and to the world around us. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about the notion of having it all. For women, having it all has historically meant climbing the corporate ladder to some high-powered job, getting married or having a long-term partner, buying a house, having kids who you, with the help of your partner and maybe some paid help on top, expertly raised to be part of the next generation of high-performing humans. The funny thing is, for most of history, no one was telling women they could have much of anything, let alone have it all. Up until about 50-ish years ago, women were given very few options. So where did this come from? Well, I looked into it, and the earliest use of the phrase dates back to 1982. That's when Helen Gurley Brown was the editor-in-chief of Cosmopolitan magazine. She released a book called Having It All: Love, Success, Sex, Money, Even If You're Starting With Nothing. Before Helen was in charge, Cosmo was a women's magazine written by men. Helen helped change that. She published honest, candid advice on careers, love, fashion, and sex. And in the process, she turned Cosmo into one of the most widely sold women's magazines in the world. With the release of her book, Having It All, in 1982, Helen also helped usher in a new era of American womanhood. In this new era, women were no longer boxed in by sexist and outdated limitations. They could do anything, and they didn't have to sacrifice anything either. Having it all was a promise, but also a challenge, and ultimately an expectation, a totally unrealistic one. Today, having it all almost feels passé, part cliche and part joke. The girl boss figure might actually persist, but we're also more honest about the fact that balance between yourself, a partner, work, and kids is a fleeting moment, not a sustained experience. For starters, it wasn't illegal for employers to discriminate on the basis of pregnancy until 1978. It means that women could and did lose their jobs for getting pregnant. It happened all the time. Research on parenthood from the past 20 years has also thrown a wrench into the fantasy of having it all. Studies show that working women who become moms have lower lifetime earnings and fewer professional opportunities compared to the women who don't. This is known as the motherhood penalty, and it shows up regardless of whether women continue working or take time off to raise their families. Speaking of time off, the United States is just one of 7 countries in the world without federally mandated paid maternity leave. I'm so lucky to work for a company that does offer paid time off, but the vast majority of workers in the U.S. don't get any. Maybe we could have it all, or at least have more, if there are more structural supports in place for working mothers. Needless to say, I am passionate. I've been doing a lot of reading, a lot of story catching of people's individual experiences, and some venting about what I learned. But also lately, I have been doing a lot of smiling because I am about to do something and go on a journey that I've envisioned for myself for a long time, becoming a mom and building a family with a partner that I love. When I thought about who to bring on to the show to talk about this, there were so many experts to choose from. But what's been most helpful for me over the past 7 months as I've been trying to sort out all of this stuff wasn't a study or a book, which it typically is. It was the conversations I've had with friends and colleagues who have already gone through the journey of pregnancy and are now living and working through everything that comes after that. So today, I want to let you in on a supercharged version of those conversations. With me today are 3 of my colleagues and friends, Jessi, Hempel, Courtney, Coupe, and Alyssa Merwin. Let me tell you, this is a powerhouse panel of working moms, and you are in for some good and honest conversation. So let's get into it. Okay, so before we really jump in, I want you all to give me an introduction to who each of you are and tell me about, not just your role here, but also your role as a parent. Let's start with Courtney.
So I'm Courtney Coupe. I'm the head of original programming here at LinkedIn. So I've been at LinkedIn for 2 years. I've been in media my whole life, though. So joined from CNN, ABC, Bloomberg. I was at CNN when I had my one and only. So I've got one child. His name is Charlie. And he was born in April of 2020, which I feel like is going to be a very important through line.
What a time. Yeah.
In this conversation.
Amazing. How about you, Jessy?
So my name is Jessi Hempel. I host Hello Monday, which is a podcast in our portfolio of podcasts. And more broadly, I'm on our leadership team where I advise on media strategy and help in every aspect of putting together what I consider to be a world-class media team. And I am also a mother. My wife and I have 2 children. They are 3.5, and my son is 6. And I'm the non-carrying parent. My wife did the hard work of carrying them, which is a specific kind of role. And my first day of work was 3 days after our first child was born.
Wow.
Which may be a through line in our conversation.
That feels, we're picking up threads here. Okay, and then Alyssa, how about you?
My name is Alyssa Merwin Henderson, and I am the vice president of sales for our Sales Navigator business here at LinkedIn. And we help companies drive growth through leveraging the LinkedIn network and the Navigator platform. And on the parent front, I am the biological mother to a soon-to-be 4-year-old little guy and the bonus mom to 17 and soon-to-be 16-year-old girls. So we say on weeks when they're with us, we have a very full life, and probably a very full life also on the off weeks.
So I brought the 3 of you here because I think we're all pretty ambitious people. And I've been thinking a lot about how we navigate the process of becoming pregnant, becoming a parent, figuring out where your ambition and your career fit in this new journey you're going to take. And I think there's a lot of positives to it, but I also want to talk to people who are thinking about, how do I go about having kids? Should I have kids? What does it actually look like? I think when I first found out I was pregnant, I was like, oh my God, I spent 7 weeks in like a spiral going, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And that's obviously changed over time. But I really wanted to give people a sense of what this looks like so that they can navigate it better than I did, or than maybe some of us did. So I want to start first with, when you found out you were going to become a parent, what did you think about when you related that back to your career? Or how did you relate that back to the idea that you wanted to have an ambitious career? And I'm going to start with you, Jessi.
It is a beautiful question to begin with. Mostly because when you find out you're going to become a parent, you think you know something. But the process of becoming a parent means that you learn that you know very little. You have so little control over what's going to happen. It took me a while to decide that I wanted to become a parent. It was really my wife who was, 7 years into our relationship, said, I think we should try this. And then it became an intellectual exercise for me. I thought, well, if she wants to try this, I can't figure out why there would be anything wrong with it. I guess we should. And so in the spring of 2018, when we found out that my wife was expecting. I looked up and I thought, well, how I have always thought of myself. My entire identity is as a writer, but there's no way that I can afford to raise twins in New York as a writer. How is this going to work? And so maybe much like you, a different set of questions. I spent quite a bit of time, I would say 2-3 months, just in the question of like, how could I possibly retain any aspect of who I think I am and also make room for this big new thing that's about to happen?
How about you, Alyssa? How did you think about ambition, career, and becoming a parent?
I wasn't sure I wanted to be a parent as a starting point. So I was really ambivalent for a long time. I was also married before, and I think that added to the ambivalence. And so I was, I guess, maybe on the later side. I got divorced around 38, 39 and had my son, I'm around 40. And so by the time that happened, I was in a place in my career where I didn't feel like I was making big trade-offs because I'd been working for so long. But part of that was also really deliberate because I think when I graduated from college, I had some goals in mind, and I was like, I'm gonna, travel the world, and I'm gonna build a great career, and then I'll think about family. And some of that played out. I didn't necessarily anticipate getting married and then getting divorced and then finding a new partner before I had a family, but that's sort of how it played out. But I remember when I got pregnant, it was during COVID. And so it was an interesting time because no one really would have known I was pregnant because we were all on Zoom and you could only see, from the head up. And so I had this interesting dilemma of how do I think about communicating to my team and to my boss, and what does this mean? And so I remember, just thinking about, I'm in a leadership position. I'm one of the, senior female leaders running a large business here. And so I don't know, everyone has different decisions about when they want to communicate. And for me, I felt like I wanted to communicate as early as it made sense. Like once we got sort of the okay from the doctor that things seemed okay. And for my manager, I shared it with him also, really early. And it's a good thing I did because I experienced some challenges later in the pregnancy, and I was also having to go to the doctor every single day, and we weren't sure how things were going to turn out. And I think that for me, being really open and being able to share the challenges that I was navigating with my team and with my boss was really important because I wanted to make it okay to talk about the hard things, and that I was trying to balance the, leading a large team in a business with also having to go, check in every day to make sure the baby was okay and that I was okay. Yeah. And so, yeah, it was for someone who was not sure she wanted to have kids. It was a lot to navigate.
Life changed quickly.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
It did. Yeah.
You talked about that you were pregnant during Zoom times. You were pregnant during COVID times. So people wouldn't necessarily know, and you could actually have kept that for quite a while. And so that decision of navigating that first period, it sounds like you were comfortable enough with your boss and with some other people to talk about this early. And I think also a lot of people may not actually feel that way or may not know how to navigate that. And so I'm curious, as you think about this, Courtney, like your experience at work, what was that like for you? I mean, that first period where you're in trimester 1 and, I don't know about you all, but I was feeling sick. I was tired. All the things, hormones raging, and you're coming into a meeting and going, the last thing I want to do is be here and I can't tell anyone. And for me, at least, I chose not to tell anyone for quite a while. So I'm curious what that was like for you.
So I had a very similar situation where I made the conscious decision to wait as long as humanly possible to tell people. And it was completely a career-driven choice because I thought that people would look at me differently, in that I had just been promoted into an elevated position at CNN and was responsible for figuring out what the new leadership looked like where I was leaving.
Wow.
And so I had this fear that if I revealed that I was pregnant before I had everything on lock, that somehow people would lose faith in either me or in the business I was leaving. I felt like I had to have everything wrapped in a bow and so perfect so that everyone would have full confidence that everything was going to be okay. So I think I waited until I was in my 6th month. I was not hiding it very well. That's the funniest thing is at this point it was like December of 2019. So we weren't on Zoom yet. I was obviously wearing bigger clothes, baggier clothes. I thought I was doing a phenomenal job of hiding it. And when I finally was like, today is the day, the transition plan is in place, that people have been announced, everyone is great. And I told my boss and he started laughing and he said, I know. And he's like, my chief of staff told me like 2 months ago that she thought you were pregnant. And I was like, cool. Okay. Well, that did not go but obviously people had assumptions, had realized it. They were waiting for me to announce it on my own time. No one was asking me any questions about it. And the reality is no one lost any faith in any of the work I was doing. And that was pressure I was putting on myself around a perception of what pregnancy meant. And it was ridiculous.
I can totally relate with the maybe anxiety of, are people going to think I'm less capable, or will I take myself out of the race by announcing that I'm going to be going on parental leave? I still had career ambitions, clearly, and I wanted to make sure that before I went out, I kind of knew where I stood. And so what I did is I actually went around and did a bit of a 360 listening to her. I really was seeking very direct feedback on what is your perception of me today, and what's the gap between where I am and what I aspire to do, which was to get into this global role. And so I tried, I don't know if it's controlling the narrative, but I really wanted to understand what the narrative was. And then I worked really diligently before going out on leave to take that feedback and make sure I was adapting how I was showing up to overcome some of the feedback that I'd gotten. And then before I went out, I got a phone call. And the call was to say, when you come back, we're going to elevate you into this role.
Wow.
Into the role that, a job I never imagined I would be in. And so that was a really cool moment of, I feel like, taking a bit of ownership and agency, because I had sort of an expiring timeline, right, to try to do something about.
I think that also this brings up the idea of agency in our careers. It's like, it feels like if you're the caring parent, when this happens, someone said to me, she was like, it feels like it happens to you, even if you meant to do it. It's like this feeling of like, this is happening to me now, instead of how do I want this narrative to go and how do I want this experience to go? So your example is one where you said, well, I'm not going to let that happen. I'm actually going to go out and find out what I need to know, so I'm not leaving kind of in the dark, which I think happens to people for sure in their careers. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it feels very in line with what parenthood did to me, which is to say, at first, my ambition disappeared. Like when I first became a parent, and I remember it took 10 months for me to figure out how to get my own clothes on, keep the baby alive all day, and just answer emails at work. But then I remember like crystal clear the day that my ambition came back. And I wanted things for myself again. But I wanted them with this new urgency, which is to say that if I was going to spend time away from my child, it was going to be time that really mattered. And that set me to thinking about, like, what did I want to be able to say on my deathbed that I had accomplished? And so I knew that I wanted to write a book. I'd wanted to write a book for 20 years, never gotten around to doing it, and decided, okay, now that I am back to work, I'm going to put my attention on this goal. And then when we had a second child, and I had the privilege of being the non-carrying parent. And folks, let's just talk about that a second, okay? Because I am a mother who did not have to give my physical body over to be the vessel to carry my children, either of my children. And I am a mother who did not breastfeed them for the first X number of months of their lives. To be really honest, my wife didn't either. Breastfeeding is super hard. Not everyone can do it. Your child will be okay.
Amen.
I just went to a class last week and I was like, wow, we're in for a ride.
I never
well,
figured
I'm in
it
for a
out.
ride.
But we were able to use my parental leave for my second child, for me, as a book leave. And then I was able to use that time to actually work on this passion project. I would not suggest, by the way, doing this. It was hard as heck. But I would say that I cherish the ambition that being a parent unlocked in me.
Well, they talk about like what's the entrepreneur effect, where when you have a kid, you become more ambitious. A lot of entrepreneurs become more ambitious and work harder. Partially, I think, because you know your priorities better and you have less time to actually worry about some of the superfluous stuff that we worry about on a day-to-day basis.
Also, you work smarter. Do you all think, I just feel like I got much better at time management.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely.
We'll be right back with Jessy, Courtney, and Alyssa. And we're back with Jessy, Courtney, and Alyssa. You know, I was talking to someone about how important it is to, or if it's important to actually prioritize passion and meaning when it comes to your career. And this was a professor who's done studies on this. And one of the things that she said is that oftentimes what can happen is we either make the choice to widen or narrow our meaning-making portfolio. And so when I think of having children and having a family or having a relationship, that's an opportunity to widen your meaning-making portfolio. How do you derive meaning from your life? Where, you know, you may have prioritized your career for years before that. So it's a big change. I'm curious for you all, how do you now think about your career in relation to your families, knowing that you have wider portfolios than you did before, but we all had time to actually really sit in our careers before making that choice?
I think for me, I wanted to be the model of a parent that I am not sure I had when I was coming up. Part of that is I have never had a female manager. I've always had male managers. And so I think part of my ambition was tied to what I saw through how they had their own ambition. And I realized that I had the wrong model. And so it was very hard to get pregnant with Charlie. It took us a couple of years. And I had this aha moment that was, I worked too hard to have this child, to not be around for him. To basically say, great, I'm going to get on the 6 a.m. train, I'm going to get on the 8 p.m. train, and I'll see you on the weekends. And so it was the combination of those two things that you can have both. You can still be ambitious in your career. You can still show up, and you can still be a parent. And it truthfully, to your point, comes down to time management and how you choose to set your time and where you choose to set your time and how you get things done. You don't have to trade one in for the other, and you can still be incredibly passionate about both. And one is not a replacement of the other.
Yes, and.
Yes.
Yes, and. I agree. And also, I think there's a seasonality to it. And sometimes when we're thinking about time management, we think about it in hours and days. And we also need to think about it in years and seasons. And I know for me, the career that I had up until I became a parent was a career in which I was on a plane 5-6 times a month. I was out of New York more than I was in New York. And before becoming a parent, I didn't have any angst about this. I loved this career. And I could not have that career and be the parent that I want to be to my children today. And that part of the way that I navigated that as an ambitious person, more by accident than on purpose, I'm going to be honest, is becoming a parent late. I was just completely ambivalent about it in my 30s and not ambivalent about my career. I loved my career. And I became a parent in my early 40s. And by that point, I had enough seniority and enough tenure and enough of a reputation that I was able to buy myself time that I wouldn't have been able to earlier. And I think that we need to be realists about this, that kids will take things that we aren't expecting and can't plan for from us. And we have to be careful not to be like, but you can make it work. See, I did. The truth is, I don't know about how parenthood feels for anybody in this table. I know I always feel like I'm barely stitching it together.
You need to find yourself at Jessy, because in every one-on-one that Jessy and I have, we reserve 10 minutes to talk about how we are struggling or what is happening with our children that we just need support on.
Yeah, it's true.
I think the other side of this too is giving ourselves permission to not need to be there for all of the things. I remember learning from another female executive at LinkedIn who was unapologetic about the things that she wasn't going to be there for her children. And that was before I had kids. But it was one of the greatest gifts that I got into. As an example, I very rarely, in the parent that is, doing drop off or pick up and, even bath time sometimes. And that's okay. Those are not necessarily for me the things that I think are the most important ways that I want to be there. And so deciding what are the things that I and we are going to prioritize and be okay not prioritizing. And that just giving myself permission has been really helpful. And I will say actually on the opposite, Jessy, from the travel, my job, it's a global role and I have quite a bit of agency over my schedule. I relish the time away. I'm just really honestly, it's really nice. Not all the time. I don't want to be away from, my family too much, but having a bit of time when it is just me to have some space to, be fully present with my team and to do a bit of the business travel at times is really re-energizing for me also because I'm not having to be someone's partner or mother in those moments. I'm being able to have some independence. I'm me and I'm investing with my team and filling my cup in a different way. So I think that it's a balance to all of it. But I try not to feel guilty for the times that I am away because I'm making a choice to do that.
You're reminding me of when Justice Ketanji Brown was sworn in. She had, she made her speech about joining the Supreme Court, et cetera, and her children were there. I think she has 2 daughters, and her husband was there. And she talked about the fact that she chose to not be at everything, but that she was very clear with her children about what she was doing instead and why it was so important. And I really valued that. It was, I grew up with, in a pretty typical household where my dad worked a lot, my mom was around more. And I think there's a real value to hearing a parent, especially a mom, because some of these kind of ideas about how we should parent are still in place, to hear a mom say, here's why I'm doing what I'm doing. So I really love the idea of giving yourself permission.
Yeah, and I'll take that one step further. In addition to the job and the travel and the things I choose to prioritize or not, I have also, when I was on maternity leave, I made space to reconnect with, and I played tennis growing up, and I didn't play for 20 years. And all of a sudden, I was like, I'm going to reconnect with a part of me that I forgot was there. And to this day, I still prioritize a couple of mornings before work. I still get up and go do that for me. And we call it our mom therapy because there's a few of us that do it together. So I'm really probably pushing the envelope of, making some different decisions, but that's what I need to be a better version of, the partner and parent that I need to be.
I love that. I feel like even the need for this conversation happens because the world has such license to tell women who they should be and how they should act. And one of my favorite guests on Hello Monday was a CEO of a company, a woman named Leah Demasi, who has a couple of children who are, middle school age. And Leah is a hard-charging financial executive and travels a ton. And I asked her about balance. And she said, the only person that needs to be okay with my decisions about the time I make for my family is me. And I'm great with them. And I thought,
nice.
That's right.
Well, one of the things that you mentioned that I think is really valuable is oftentimes because we've maybe been defined by our work and then we're defined by being a parent, is that people may lose track of actually who we are outside of those two things.
Yeah.
Right, including ourselves.
Listening to you talk about tennis, I was like, I need to do that more.
Well, yeah, I'm curious, not to put you on the spot, Courtney, but I'm thinking, for each of you, who are you outside of being a parent? Because it's we forget that parents, and especially moms, had lives before that point, had ambitions or dreams. And so I'm curious, how do you think about staying connected to who you are, or how would you like to do that?
I was going to say, I think I'm the model of what not to do. I think that my brain, 4 years in, parenthood is a journey. It is going to continue for many, many moons.
Don't be so hard on yourself.
No, and everything's a phase. Everything is a phase. And I actually think that I have recognized that what I have currently deprioritized is that third area. If someone asked me what's my hobby, I literally can't answer the question. It's a very favorite thing at LinkedIn to be like, oh, what's not on your LinkedIn profile? Tell me something about yourself. Like, you stand up in front of the company and you're supposed to like show off a skill or talent. And I literally couldn't think of a single thing that I would do. And I'm a little okay with that some days. I'm not when it's like, oh, shoot, I was supposed to get my hair cut and it's like so long and straggly and oh gosh, like I do certain things, like I'll get a pedicure. That's my version of I can get in and out in 30 minutes. But like in this space and time, I recognize that like I haven't quite figured that part out yet. And I'm not mad about it. And I'm not sad about it because I think that there's going to come a point in time in the next couple of little bit where I will figure it out. That I will figure out how to manage the time a little bit better. What are the sacrifices that I am willing to make in other areas? Because it's like I'm the first to admit it.
You said something about, it's like seasons. There are seasons, I think, in career and in life. And I often think about, is my life in a place where I can spend a bit more energy prioritizing the career? And similarly, perhaps career, there's too much going on at work to, invest in some of the tennis or the other things that I would like to be able to do. And so I think this idea of recognizing which season you're in is really important. And that's, when I, have career conversations with, team members, it's one of the things I often will have them think about is what season are you in outside of work and at work, because you have to think of them in tandem to, maybe this is or isn't the time to go for the next big job or whatever it is that you want to take on.
Yeah.
I've been struggling with that myself because I've gone from a place where I feel like I've been so ambitious to finally I got the job that I never thought I would ever have. And so it's like when you get to that point and all you see ahead of you is kind of road and there's not necessarily a next climb I have to make so that I can, and I'm like doing this because I push. I'm like, I want what I want and I will get there and I'll create it. I don't feel that today. And so even talking to my husband about really seasons, which you brought up, is like recognizing where I am today and being okay with that, which has been one of the hardest things in my pregnancy journey is just going, okay, this is where I'm at. And like right now, this is my season. And this is actually the season I wanted to be in. I knew this was coming, but to experience it is different. And so allowing myself to go, okay, I'm going to sit here now and have the faith that I will return. The character that I have around my ambition and what I want to do will come back. But right now may not be the time. Has been a really interesting experience because it's never happened before. So it's the first time for me. I'm going, oh my gosh, and I've made up all sorts of things like, am I lazy? Am I all of that? And, you are typically harder on yourself than everyone else is because everyone else goes, well, you're pregnant. So that makes a lot of sense. I'm like, no, it doesn't.
The other thing becoming a mother did for me, and my spouse says becoming a father did for him, is we stopped thinking about our careers like ladders. It was always about what is the next rung? How do you just keep getting higher? And now I think we both say, if this is the highest rung we ever get to, but we get to climb 10 other ladders in horizontal, that's totally okay. We're like, there is a point where the bigger your job, the more responsibility, the more planes you have to get on, the more things you have to do. Do you want to make that choice? And it's okay to say no.
We're a group of women sitting at this table who all share that we're fairly ambitious and pretty clear-sighted in our goals. But that's actually only one acceptable expression of being a working mother. And I think as I try to answer this question about my wife, that one thing that was extremely confounding for me is that my wife said, gosh, when the kids come, I'd love to spend as much time as I can with them at home. And I was like, no, you don't need to do that. We can afford a nanny. Like, I think we're going to be able to afford the structure so that you can go. And she's like, you are not hearing me. The women's movement was about choice. I am sharing my choice. And I was like, yeah, okay, but that's cool. But what do you want to do? And we have been extremely fortunate in that our desires complement each other beautifully. Our children really have benefited so much from having her. But more than that, my wife works part-time at a job that she likes a lot when she's doing. And when she's not doing it, she doesn't think about it because she's really busy at gymnastics with my daughter.
That sounds magical, actually. Yeah, I'm like, wait a second. She's incredible, clearly. I'm curious for each of you, what's been magical about becoming a parent and a bonus parent? I'm going to start with you, Jessy.
Oh, gosh. I did not know that I had the capacity not to be the main character of my own story. And it's such a relief after 4 decades of being the main character of my own story to cede that role to someone else. And it is magic for me. It is really magic.
Both of your kids, that's the feeling you have?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, it's different with both of them. With my son, because I think probably because he came first, I hover. I worry. I worry and hover and hover and worry. With my daughter, who came on the day that she was expected, weighing robustly more than her brother did, I just stand back in awe constantly. I just enjoy her. She's 3.5, and 3.5, you all know exactly what 3.5 is. You've been there fairly recently. It is so much. And I just really sit back and enjoy it.
What about you, Alyssa?
So being a rather impatient person in most things in life, I think the biggest surprise that I think I would say has been quite magical is realizing I have a completely different energy and patience with my child and the children than I knew existed in me. I just have more space and openness to, I think, just be and experience. And that is, I don't think I've gone through most of life with that energy. And so that's been a cool thing to learn about myself that, the kids have brought out in me that I didn't know was there.
Yeah, I wonder if you would have been able to access that without having children, if you would have ever been pushed to even do that.
I don't think so, because I don't think you're forced to slow down and be in the moment. And that is something that I definitely wouldn't have discovered. And it's interesting to apply that to other parts of life, too.
Yeah. How about you, Courtney?
I really am fascinated by nature versus nurture. And I think that my favorite part about watching Charlie is watching him become who he's going to be, right? And there are so many little things that I see that I'm like, oh, that's me. Oh, that's Sam. He has that just because he's part of that. But the even better things are when he does something that's uniquely Charlie.
Oh.
And he does it because he's just figuring out who he is as a human. And he's an awesome little human who just has so much curiosity and is such a unique individual. I think I had an assumption of what raising a boy would be, because there's all this boys are loud and boys are jumpy. And I don't know, I came from a family of all girls. It was my mom and my sister and me. So I was like, oh, boys, what are they? And I don't know, just seeing him become this magical little man is absolutely phenomenal.
That makes me want to cry. That's so sweet. When you all think about the idea of the conversation that we're having, you mentioned earlier that this whole movement was so that I could have choice and you could have choice. When I think of the movement, as a millennial, I feel like when I was coming into work, it was about the girl boss, and it was about the fact that you can start your business and have your side hustle and do this and do that and be a parent and all these things. And not only can you should, right? So that's what the movement felt like for me joining the workforce. So the question that I'm going to ask you all to finish our conversation is, can you have it all? If someone asked you that question, how would you respond? And I'm going to start with you. No pressure.
I think about Dolly Parton in the 1980s when I hear that question. I'm going to give a pat answer. Yes, you can have it all, but not at the same time. Really, truly not at the same time. And I'm also going to say that economics determines a lot of what you get to have. And we would be remiss not to acknowledge that firmly as we have a conversation about motherhood. Because becoming a parent has a huge impact on the kinds of choices you get to make about your career, regardless of what you want to do. And in my own situation, because I was quite senior by the time we became parents, I've had the good fortune of getting to have a lot of choice in whether and how I want to engage in my career.
Yeah. I'm really glad you brought that up there. I think there's like a natural, right, privilege we all have, not just being women who have prioritized career first, but also working for a company that allows us to do a lot of things that I have never heard are possible at many other companies that people work for. And so I really appreciate that you brought that up, because I think it's so important that like the fact that we're able to sit here is just is a huge signal of our privilege, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'll add to that last thought around, I feel an immense responsibility to model and to make sure that the women in our organization and all of the parents feel like they can aspire to the roles that they want and the kinds of careers they want. Because I want to make sure that it makes me sad when I hear someone say, gosh, I'm not sure I would want a role like yours because I don't know if I can do that and have a family. So I try to really be thoughtful about how am I showing up and not being online at all hours of the day. Mm-hmm. And I have very bright lines around, I mentioned, in the morning, I'm not taking meetings super early so that I can, get my tennis in on the days that I want to do that. And I, turn off at a certain hour so that I can be with the family. But those are important moments, I think, of role modeling, how you have to set boundaries so that other people feel like they also can. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise no one would want to, I think, build big careers if you always have to make a trade-off between my family and my career. I think to answer your question, I do think you can have it all, but I don't think you can be there for it all. And as I mentioned, I'm not always there for all of the, school performances and the drop-offs and the bath. And I'm okay with that.
How about you, Courtney?
I think to your point about modeling, as I said, I try to do a good job of that for my team. And a lot of that modeling is around transparency. So if I am unavailable or if I'm going to miss something, I don't just say, or put a hold on a calendar that says Courtney's not here. I'm very vocal of, I've got Charlie's holiday concert today. I'm going to be offline between 10 and 11, whatever it is. Or Charlie has a doctor's appointment. Because I think it's really important that people understand where we are.
And that it's okay.
And it's okay, because also it's either an hour or a day or a week. Like, time will come back to you in some way, shape, or form. So I think that's really, really important. So my pivot on can you have it all, I think it starts with, well, how do you define all? Mm-hmm. And my personal definition of it is, do I feel full? Does my heart feel full? Am I putting things in there? And I would say a resounding yes to that. Yet, I have obviously talked about sacrifices that I make in certain ways, but I don't feel empty because of them. The things that bring me joy are still there. They're still hard days. But overall, I feel like I've got a lot of joy.
Yeah. And like you're having your version of it all.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
And what's your answer?
I most ascribe to what you said. I'm very much a seasons person, and the more I come back to seasons, the better off I am, because then I'm not throwing everything at the wall at the same time, trying to spin my wheels around every ambition. I'm good at doing that because I enjoy it and it's energizing, but eventually I will burn out. So I'm trying to get better at, like, can I be in this season? Can I savor the season that I'm in today and allow that? And then the next season will come, just like every season on the planet comes. Like, we never miss summer. So, like, why am I worried that I'm going to miss some sort of season change? So to me, it's you can, and not at the same time. And it's probably a combination of yours too, which is, what does all mean? I think because a lot of us have experienced all sorts of experiences in our career, in our lives, et cetera, we've all been told what we should be aspiring to, what all should be. We don't end up defining it for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so I've spent a lot of time defining that. And then that's been redefined after meeting someone and getting married and going, oh, actually, it all means that I am choosing to focus on my relationship. It means that maybe I have a smaller circle of friends because of that. And that's really meaningful. That feels like all for me, where for someone else, that may not be. And I'm very much okay with the fact that, like, we all have a different version of that. I think it's more about finding it than it is about anything else. Because if you subscribe to everyone else's version of it all, you will eventually find yourself lost. So I think that's the most important thing. Yeah. Thank you all for being here. You've been amazing, incredible, thoughtful, and I really appreciate you sharing. You've got a thought. or
No.
question? Okay. It's like,
No, this is the thought that I just had in my own head. Talking about this felt 100 times harder to me than talking about anything else that I talk about.
wow.
So my internal.
Well, thank you for doing it. Jessy, you're not used to being interviewed. This is the problem.
You notice she asked you a lot of questions. I clocked it every time.
I turn the tables. I know she can stretch. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. And thank you all for being so vulnerable.
Well, thanks for creating the space.
Yeah. Thanks again to my colleagues Jessi Hempel, Courtney Coupe, and Alyssa Merwin for sitting down with me and sharing their wisdom. We are so grateful for the honesty and compassion that you each brought to this incredibly vulnerable topic. And to my listeners, you might be wondering, what does all of this mean for the show? Well, first of all, I won't be gone for long, so don't worry too much. And while I am, we're going to be dropping new episodes of the show every week like we always do. You'll also be hearing from some other members of the Everyday Better team. So before we go, I want to introduce you to my fabulous producers, Grace.
Hi.
And Emily.
Hey, Leah.
Okay, so like I said, for all of you listeners, you're still going to hear me in conversation with a new and interesting guest every week, but you'll also hear Grace and Emily on the mic. They're going to help set context for each of these great conversations. This is the first time you guys have spoken on this show.
Yes.
I'm like, how does this feel?
Well, it's finally my time to shine.
She's just kidding. No, she's really just kidding. Producers actually hate attention, so we're a little nervous about this. I've actually never been in front of the mic before, even though I've been working in audio for a while. But we're also so excited to support you and support the show during this really important time in your life, Leah. And also, we talk about taking risks, especially career risks, all the time on this show. So now it's our turn.
Totally. And to get even more honest, Grace and I have been debating for a while now how real to be about everything that's going on behind the scenes and how we feel about it. But to your point, the show is all about authenticity and vulnerability. So we're joining in and doing it as well.
Okay, but seriously, I want our listeners to know they're in really good hands. Sometimes I wonder if listeners think that because I'm the only voice they hear consistently every week, that I make Everyday Better happen all on my own. Absolutely not true, and that would be an amazing feat. But actually, there's a whole team of people who are involved working behind the scenes to create the show and the content that you see and hear. And Grace and Emily are responsible for finding all of our incredible guests that you hear me interview each week. They do so much research and write questions for those interviews to help me prep, and then a whole lot of editing magic to make it all sound good. And I haven't even mentioned the fact that we have a video producer, Andres Cardona, and our amazing sound engineer, Asaf Gadron. They're also with me every single time I sit down with a guest to make sure we're looking and sounding great. So before we go, Emily and Grace, why don't you guys tell us what's coming up on the show?
Okay, well, this month we are continuing this conversation about motherhood. We'll be talking about Black maternal health and also digging into some philosophies around and strategies for balancing work and kids.
Later this year, we're going to dig into wellness and misinformation. We've been thinking a lot recently about how can we tell when something's true and trustworthy, especially with so much information online and on social media. So we've got some great guests lined up to help us decipher all the latest health fads.
We've also heard from a lot of you, our listeners, about how much you loved Leah's recent solo episode on anxiety. So we've planned a bunch more Leah-only episodes focused on our favorite personal development tools.
You can also expect some special appearances from Jessi Hempel, who you heard from earlier. She hosts our sister show, Hello Monday.
Leah, anything else you want to add?
Well, first, it is so funny. One of the first people I ever interviewed said that when an entrepreneur creates a business, their brain changes in the same way that a mother does when she has a baby. Right? You guys sound like me on an interview. But it's true. And I really feel like I'm like leaving my toddler or like 5-year-old is going to kindergarten.
I was just about to say
you guys are the
daycare, like
teachers.
where's the daycare?
Yeah.
So it's a really crazy feeling to take a little step away from something that like truly has been and continues to be the coolest job I've ever had in my life. But I'm really excited to focus on this new addition to my family. And, as you all just heard in this conversation, I think there's a lot of power in recognizing how in seasons of your life you have different things that matter most. So I'm curious, excited, nervous, and all the things to expand what matters most to me. But you guys have been unbelievable in the process of helping me get ready to focus on this new addition to our family. And I honestly, I'm going to cry, can't thank you both enough. I will say, and I think many people will recognize this, when you get to work with people who are incredible and you have teammates who can support you and are reliable, it is the best feeling. So kudos to both of you. And then to our listeners, I want to say I'm really grateful for you and for your support. I see your feedback on LinkedIn. I see it on the podcast apps, and it reminds me every single time I read it why I love this work more than I've ever loved any work I've done in my life, and why I cannot wait to continue doing it. So if you have questions or thoughts on our conversation today, we'd love to hear from you. Send them to us at everydaybetter@linkedin.com. I may not have all the answers yet, but I promise we will figure this out together. Everyday Better is a production of LinkedIn News.
The show is produced by me, Grace Rubin.
And me, Emily Reeves.
Asaf Gadrone is our sound engineer. He makes sure we sound good in the studio.
Tim Boland mixed our show.
We get additional support from Alex Kuznetsova and Ali McPherson.
Sarah Storm is our senior producer.
Enrique Montalvo is our executive producer.
Dave Pond is head of production and creative operations.
Maya Pope-Chappelle is director of content and audience development.
Courtney Coupe is head of original programming.
Dan Roth is the editor-in-chief of LinkedIn.
And I'm Leah Smart. Thanks for coming with us, and we'll see you next week.